all 300 students into a different class.
Yeah, oh.
Just to so yeah, we are aware of some issues.
So we will start, and thank you so much for getting here. For everyone who's pitched in, to say none of us really reside here, so it's we very much appreciate the University of Sydney as our host and enabling us all to get together. If you need Wi-Fi, if things happen during the day, there are Toby here and Robert here who had some access. And so to introduce myself, I'm Prue Mitchell. I'm currently the president of Wikimedia Australia, the chapter who's organising today, but it is a community conference. So you are all community. It's our conference today. Some of us have been here for 2 and a bit days as part of the Worlds of Wikimedia conference, which has been run by University of Sydney staff who are also Wikimedians. So we're at different maybe energy levels from the people who are here. This is the weekend and your first day, so just be kind to each other, and we'll work through. We really do intend to stay to the program, and we didn't have one printed, but it is on the website, so we'll bring that. So can I nominate? Have you got the program there, Richard, on your? Yes, lovely. If I could, would you be happy to accept the timetable, the timing person, just to give us a 5-minute warning for the next thing is meant to start? We can negotiate that as a group, but just so we're aware of staying on track. So I'm planning to finish at 9:30. That's right?
Yep.
And then we'll move into the other programs. Gideon is just finding our second speaker, but that's fine. He's got the time for me and Ingrid in order to find. So this is our our logo, and where we are today. And I would very much like to pay my respects to the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, to apologise that we've come to their land, and as Wikimedia Commons, when I searched for them, they didn't exist in a tag in any way. So that's, that is something as a community we could have a look at. But it is fantastic to be able to acknowledge the education that has happened on this land for many, many thousands of years. This does come up under Eora, so there are other uses of the word Gadigal in other countries, including Papua New Guinea, which makes you think there's possibly an Australian, a connection there. I don't know, but if this is the only photo that comes up under Eora, what a fantastic artwork that is. And if it'll let me click through, I think it is worth. It's got an amazing. I've had this problem before with when you're on PowerPoint, you can't get to the internet. So let me just. There we are. Okay. So here we are. Yes. Okay. Thanks. But there is a fantastic story in here about this work. I don't know. Does anyone know this artist? So I felt really pleased that I did at least get to learn this from Commons, and perhaps we can go and start categorising some images and getting some images in there. Welcome, how are you? Great time to get here. Thank you. So one of the questions I just wanted to ask in this early session is, why are we here, and to get to know each other. And we've got a day of working together. And I suppose in one way this is why we're all here. Most of us somehow got to where we are in the movement because it exists, if you want to be really kind of at that level. And I hope that this is still the area, the thing that. Welcome, Matt. Make a space for your name tag. One of the things I'd also like to point out at this point is our safe space policy. So this is the movement doesn't put. It has a lot of policies, but this is an absolutely unshakable policy that when we meet together, it needs to be safe for everybody. If there are any, if at any stage you feel uncomfortable and would like to speak to somebody, you can come to me or to Gideon. Welcome. And certainly feel free to read this in detail if you haven't seen it already. We have it on our website. When we get to morning tea, this table over here is where the food will be, so we'll be moving around a little bit during the day. I was going to just run around the room and find out why you are here, because one of our objectives as a chapter is to get to know our community. We've now lost, there's a box of pens over there, so in a minute maybe we'll just do this as, you can stay, just put those around.
Yeah,
thank you. So just, why you're here, both physically today, what brought you here, and what brought you into this fantastic movement that we're part of. In terms of Wikimedia Australia specifically, this is our purpose. So the kind of conversation and theme of today's conference is a community on purpose. And this is our purpose, this is what we are incorporated, if you like, under as our organisation. So you can see there that we're about works, educational and about Australia, culture, environment, news and media. So have a think during the day about how well we're doing in any of those things, and I'd say it's different at in different sections. We're certainly going to celebrate the natural environment part today. The news and media is interesting, and if Bunty was here, she might have something to say about that.
Are we being anonymous, or?
Yes, you can. Well, it's up to you. I thought this was an anonymous way, rather than everyone going around and saying, which A would take a lot of time, but B, I know some people aren't necessarily comfortable doing this, but we'll just hang on to them and we'll collect them. What you're doing here, why are you here, okay? And not on Earth, but why are you in this room today? And what brought you here is a good story. If you can find out from people at morning tea that when you're talking to them, what attracted you to start being part of Wikimedia. It's a good, you find a lot of great stories. In the interest of keeping to time, our activity, this is at the very high level as to what we said we would do. We're now, Wikimedia Australia is 11 going on 12, okay, years old. And this was what our founders set up and got registered as an association. So it's probably not a bad time to have a look at it. We're not here to redo constitutions or anything today, but we are here to reflect. And so at any stage, if you think this is no longer what we should be doing, this is the type of time where we could start talking about those. We've been, as a community, I like to think in a kind of growth analogy. We've had our tantrums. We've grown out of tantrum times. We are a little bit in childhood. Thank you. And so the first thing we've been given is our first lot of pocket money this year. So the Wikimedia Foundation, attracts a lot of funding through banner ads and fundraising, does a fantastic job, so that we haven't had to do that, and then we apply to them for grants. So we received our first simple APG annual plan grant this year. We're just about to send in our reports for that. So that's been a little bit like, here you are, you can start doing some independent work, and so we're hoping that when you read the report, especially those of you who are members, so Wikimedia Australia has membership, $10 a year, just so that we can collect your email addresses and keep you more closely informed about the off-wiki activities. You don't need to be a member, everything is open to you as a community member, but that's just the next stage. We have also got a next year's grant, so there is some funding available for the activities that you would like to do, and Steve's going to we're going to work a little bit more on that later. But really, when we look around the world at other chapters that are a bit older than us, they are now getting their first jobs. Some of them are very much adults and operating completely themselves. So we need to be thinking about whether, sorry?
Like Indonesia,
right? Yes, so it'd be great to talk to the Indonesians. So this is one of the things, we're on this pathway, and that's one of the things we need to be starting to think about. Just to let you know, our activities, that's just a list from the last that will be coming up in our annual report, and people in this room can probably talk to you about those and many others that we don't know. One of the issues is finding out what's going on. So if you're doing anything and you would like it to be recorded and other people to know about it, get in touch with us so that we can maintain this list and show the activity that we're doing as a community. We have two areas of work. One is supporting outreach, education, all those things that were on that purpose slide. So these are some of the presenters and doing programs and outreach out there from yesterday. So look at those people. And then this was a committee workshop. This was about looking after our members. And this happened the last time we all got together as a committee. Now you'll see there's some quite similar faces between these two. As a community, we don't have a lot of difference between the people who are doing the work and the people who are the community themselves. So we're looking after ourselves, and it's a very full-on role. I think we all need to be very kind to ourselves and appreciate that we don't have paid staff. We are all volunteers, and this is you as well. And to say a big thank you and for being here, and for taking on all the roles that you do as a group. I won't read them out now, but as I went through the workshop, the registrations yesterday, I got pages of numbers of different projects that you are all in that I know about, and I know that a lot of you, I don't know what you're doing. So it's pretty impressive. It covers an incredible number of projects. So that's really a way of welcome, and we'll you can pass those post-it notes along, and while Ingrid is yeah, okay, well, yeah, thanks Toby for being the runner.
Come on, get to it while you're here.
We're going to do a little switch over of machines, but before I do, have a look here on the schedule, because I won't be bringing this back up again at least until after morning tea. I didn't do housekeeping. The emergency exits will help everybody get out the way you came in. That is very much the easiest and shortest way to move. When you get out through the door, Robert has given you the two toilet signs. They're in two directions. The right-hand direction is the more accessible way.
So when you walk out here and you turn right, you can walk straight into those toilets. The ones that go this way and you follow the signs, they've got stairs to go into.
So Ingrid, if I switch over to you, is that you pull that
When
out?
it comes through. before I
Oh,
can
good
use it.
idea. Oh, what a planner.
She's over.
I'm all over it.
Just a pretty next one up a pretty face.
Shut up.
Oh, we
Guess
did
I
it
am just a
automatically.
pretty
So you'll just have to go up into.
Okay.
Do you want to sit up here though?
Yeah, I was amazed.
So
Right?
people can see. Or do you want me to do your slides for you?
What do I do with all my money?
Oh,
Like
I
$10.
plugged it into one, but that's cool.
Oh, no, you don't. I can switch it to you.
Yeah, that's what
All good. Sorry. So we are very, very fortunate today to continue the theme from the conference the last 2 days, which was languages, and in particular with a focus on Indigenous languages. And Ingrid Cumming, Noongar woman from Perth, from Perth, who presented and wowed everybody yesterday. We're really lucky to have you as in the community and to have you to ourselves today. And so we'll pass over to you and give us a yell if you need anything.
Thank you. Kaya yan mama lagi apuling nicha ngang mom nicha maya garago yora maya ngang kwap nuna jeremy nina nining nicha wa ngang nguniwa ngang kokwa ngang mutang Wikipedia. Should I do the rest in Noongar as well? So the language that I speak is that of the southwest of Western Australia, Wajak. Wajak Noongar, well, Wajak is the Perth metropolitan dialect, but Noongar is the nation in which that dialect is from. However, I completely acknowledge that I'm a stranger in this country, and whenever I go to places other than my own, it needs to be made very clear that my intentions here is only as a visitor and to walk here in respect. So I took the time, which I presented for those who are at the at the WOW conference yesterday has seen this already, but I took the time to do an acknowledgement to country to make very clear that I am a visitor and I come here in nothing but good spirit and intention, and that I actually ask the permission to speak and walk on country. So usually when I travel to different places, funny story, when I was 19 and I first met my in-laws in Tasmania, they were of the firm belief that all Aborigines had been exterminated, and was I a real one? It was so funny, like this cultural learning coming into my new family. And I said, I need to go to a river. And they said, okay. Look at my husband going, is she good? And he's like, yeah, she's fine. And they took me down to the Derwent, and I rubbed sand under my arms. I threw it into the water. I spat the water and shouted out passionately to spirits of country. And they thought I was literally insane. And the reason being is because they hadn't seen that. And for me as a Noongar woman, that's so incredibly important to have that permission to do these ceremonies, to set my intention when I walk in other people's country. I'm really lucky as a Noongar woman because I get to do welcome to countries and smoking ceremonies on behalf of my elders, past and present, for the reason I stand here and I acknowledge them. And it's a wonderful way to let people feel a sense of connection to place, because we don't believe in discriminating people against their skin colour or their beliefs or their cultural religion. That's a behaviour that's foreign to us. It's about making people feel a sense of connection and comfortable when they come to our place, so we can care for them. So I've been to Sydney so many times, so Sydney knows my smell well, but we also had an elder actually welcome us as well, which is something which is an appropriate protocol. So the reason why I spend so much time talking about it, because today we're talking about Indigenous knowledge sharing. This is knowledge sharing. This is something that was embedded in country for thousands of years, it still is very much an important part of the experience for Indigenous people here in country, and something that we would love to see our non-Indigenous brothers and sisters get more and more involved with as time goes on. So for those who aren't familiar with the West and Noongar country, this is where it is. So the boundaries of Noongar country basically follows an arc from Geraldton to a place called Esperance. So anything in that southwest corridor is considered Noongar Nation, or is Noongar Nation. Within that nation there are 14 different dialects. So at the WOW conference yesterday, we were talking about the use of language and language pedias as such. It becomes problematic when it's called Noongarpedia, but there's 14 different varieties of Noongar that is spoken. So, and you can't preference one. All of them are valid, and all of them, all people who speak all languages should be able to contribute in their variation of Noongar. So that was an interesting dialogue we had yesterday. There is minimal language speakers, but there is certainly a huge revival of language happening within the southwest of WA. Our education systems have dedicated training and programs to support Noongar language teachers. You will see City of Canning, who have sent me over here this week. We do Noongar language classes led by Noongar Elder Marie Taylor. So you'll see lots and lots of opportunities for both Noongar and non-Indigenous people to learn language and engage with language. So, but it's very important to understand that the impacts of colonial activity in the southwest is one of the big reasons why people, we see this semi-dormant state of language happening within the southwest. So, unfortunately, we're the home of the birth of such policies as the 1905 Act, which rolled out issues around stolen generation and assimilation across the country. So we don't have a very proud history in relation to colonial impact in the southwest, as we basically were the area that birthed it. So a lot of people yesterday, we talked about those policies still not being widely known in Australia, but yeah, everyone knows what the South African apartheid is, and yet the South African apartheid was very much heavily influenced by the 1905 Act. So when we're talking about knowledge sharing, Indigenous knowledge sharing in particular, we need to understand that there's a lot of unlearning and relearning that needs to happen in relation to Noongar knowledge and culture, and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture across Australia overall. So Noongarpedia, I want to talk about Noongarpedia as an example of Indigenous knowledge sharing, and how we were able to successfully utilise a westernised format of knowledge sharing and archiving, and be able to collaborate with the Noongar community to create this thing called Noongarpedia, and how we share knowledge. The team that was a part of creating that was, we had 3 chief investigators. We had some pretty heavyweights in regards to chief investigators. So there's Professor Len Collard. He's a Noongar, Wajak Balladong Noongar man. He's actually my dad as well. Funnily enough, it's actually this guy that employed me, not my dad, which is good. So Dad is, obviously he's my old man, so I'm going to speak very highly of him, but he is probably one of the leading Indigenous academics in Australia around nominal culture, place names, and Noongar knowledge, and been doing that for 30 years. So incredibly smart and photogenic man, as you can see. That's where I get my looks and my charm from. Kim Scott as well, Professor Kim Scott, you may or may not know him, a globally acclaimed author, and has done a lot of work around language revival, particularly in the Great Southern area, with the Willaman group in particular, in the areas of the mainly Minang and Nakanyaki language group dialects. John Hartley, who again very well-known, globally recognised guru in media and communications, incredibly brilliant man with lots of connections, and very passionate about obviously this project. The research associates with myself, it's funny, I've just literally picked the best photo of me ever from 8 years ago, so yes, there is a difference, and Jennifer Buchanan, which it's so weird not having her by my side today, because I can't and I made this clear yesterday, I can't take credit at all for this. This was not my project. Her and I worked very closely with the Noongar community, with Gideon and all the other Wikimedians and Pedians who helped us on our journey. So, but her and I went through quite the journey together, and it's really weird she's not here. And just want to recognise. So this was done over 2 different institutions as well, UWA and Curtin. Obviously we can't go on without acknowledging that there was another chief investigator. His name was Noel Lucy. I didn't realise he was actually a student of University of Sydney, and unfortunately he lost a very brave battle to cancer in 2014. So he is Wirran Mum. He is a spirit man now, and he will always be recognised, playing an incredibly huge role in the Noongarpedia project. So Indigenous knowledge sharing and using Noongarpedia as the example. We actually went about creating our own little brand as well, which is actually using binary code, and it's like a collaboration of binary codes and Noongar symbols as well, to say our campfires and us gathering, we want to go out to the world sharing Noongarpedia. We thought that was pretty clever. So it is an ongoing network of Noongar knowledge sharing, and it uses a wide range of knowledge agents and sources to be able to create it. So the knowledge sources that the project focused on to create Noongarpedia was that within the GLAM sector, family, so actually talking direct with Noongar people. There's still a lot of stuff that hasn't been documented or recorded, so we went about the processes of recording and creating viable sources straight from community itself. Obviously a bunch of media, public institutions. The State Library of Western Australia was incredibly helpful, and particularly with a project called Storylines, which I was involved with previous to coming onto this team. We had a ridiculously amazing, supportive and good-looking person to help us with that journey, who's sitting in the front, Ian Webb, who was a huge part of supporting the Noongarpedia project. And we also work with peak bodies like the Southwest Aboriginal Land Council, Noongar language bodies. So there's this assumption that, we want to learn about Noongar stuff, but there's not much stuff out there. And in the first 12 to 18 months, we kind of said, well, that there actually is an incredible body of knowledge that is out there, and Noongarpedia, or a Noongar Wikipedia, is a great way of creating this central hub to bring it all together. And not just for Noongar people to benefit, but for our non-Indigenous brothers and sisters to also benefit. So before I made the comment about we're having to unlearn and relearn a lot of things, so Noongarpedia could actually serve the purpose of creating that journey. The knowledge agents that we turn to, obviously our team itself, we relied heavily on a lot of volunteers to help out with this. We had obviously community members. We worked with students from primary to tertiary level, elders and boss men and women of our community, Indigenous centres, including UWA and Curtin and many others, Noongarpedians who we trained up as part of the process, and obviously our incredible network of Wikimedians, which too much was never enough, particularly Gideon Digby, who was absolutely incredible leader as part of the project. So something to think about with Indigenous knowledge sharing. So Noongarpedia shares what we call the Kura, Yaya and Buddha. So we are able to share the past history, so whether it be pre-colonial, post-colonial history. We're able to talk about the today stuff, so who are the leaders and what's happening today in a contemporary context. And we're also talking about future of how we continue to capacity build or support those who want to engage with Noongar. And those 3 things are forever coexisting. So they're not static, and they're always moving and changing, and they're always relating back to each other. Because culture is an ever-evolving beast. It's certainly not, Noongar culture is not the same thing it was 60,000 years ago, but Noongar people are incredibly resilient and smart as a culture and people and community to be able to, despite what has happened or changed, be able to continue to retain that culture, largely through oral history, the yarning, the talking, the connecting, which why the face-to-face engagement was so incredibly important for Noongarpedia's development. We are heavily guided by cultural protocols and ethics as part of the project. Again, going back to Damien and State Library with their Storylines project that they did, we used a lot of their knowledge of how they did that, and that was really helpful for us to be able to lay the foundations of how we were going to ethically operate. It is bilingual for inclusivity. So when we first started this Indigenous knowledge sharing journey around Nyungar, some early thoughts was around, let's make it all in Nyungar, and if you want to go into it, then you've got to learn Nyungar. And given the state of the semi-dormant nature of the language, the lack of proficient speakers of Nyungar, and the fact that this could actually serve as a cultural awareness tool for non-Indigenous brothers and sisters, if they don't speak Nyungar, then we're already excluding them. And Nyungars are not about exclusion whatsoever, so bilingual was definitely the best way to have people still involved. And there is that thing around colonisation and people having their culture and their language taken away from them. We didn't want our community to feel shame because they don't speak Nyungar, so therefore they can't access Nyungarpedia. I think that was very important to acknowledge and to support. And obviously there is traditional knowledge, which we always are connected to and always go back to and drawn to, inspired by, but there is the contemporary knowledges and experiences and expressions of Nyungar, which are incredibly important. How our young people see, feel, act, embrace their culture and their journey being incredibly important to acknowledge. So that's just some context around Nyungarpedia, what it was and what it was trying to achieve. At any time in the presentation, if you want to ask me a question and stuff, please do, rather than having to sit there and listen to me the entire time, although I'm extremely interesting and riveting.
That's true. It's been said.
So sorry, I'll go back in just 2 secs. So I want to show you some examples of the Indigenous knowledge sharing. So the first area is Kura, or the past. So this is a section in Nyungarpedia. I just want to show you the actual Nyungarpedia. I realised wow, I didn't actually go, and this is Nyungarpedia. That never happened. We
went there anyway.
We went there anyway, right. Everyone's got a laptop or a device in front of them, so that's all good. So this is the actual pedia. So as you can see, the minute that you go into it, there is a disclaimer that is there. There already is signs of bilingual capacity starting to happen. There's a disclaimer basically saying anyone can contribute, but the Noongar language is encouraged, but if it's okay if you still want to contribute in English, that's fine. We want to acknowledge that different stages for different people around their Noongar language capacity. But hey, if you want to give writing articles in Noongar a crack, here are some resources that we've provided. So we made sure that we provided as many language resources as possible for people to still be able to either give it a go, or even if they're like, I don't want to write articles, but I really want to learn more of the language, then it's there. So we've got a range of stuff from word lists that were recorded by different people throughout the early establishment of colonies. So in Albany there was a lot of French influence, in Perth there was a lot of English, in Gelton there was a lot of Dutch influence. So it's interesting how from their language, their linguistic skills, and how they heard the language and how they've written the language as well. It's quite interesting, the word lists to look at. But there's also dictionaries that have been created by Noongar community as well, in conjunction with non-Indigenous anthropologists and researchers. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that's there. In fact, our chief investigator, one of our chief investigators, Len Collard, has literally created a database where he's collated all the language sources that are at his disposal, and literally made this incredible Excel spreadsheet where you can pull up all the different words used for head across all the different dialects. It will tell you exactly where it was recorded from, which will tell you that it's either Minang or Wajak or Nyakanjaki or whatever. It will tell you the person who recorded it and their background, their linguistic skills. It is absolutely incredible what he has. So we're starting with that, we can start to really map very clearly what are those dialect differences and the influences behind them. So I'll go back to this one, sorry. So an example of knowledge sharing of history. So Kurul means those who have been. So people that have obviously passed, but were there. You've got a series of Wikipedians or Noongarpedians who have taken photos, stuff from archives, this stuff's from storylines, Monop and Dubai. I love this guy. which is a story that Damien told me. You'll notice that he has a very interesting shoulder, which was injured apparently in a fight over a lady.
Not just any lady.
Sorry?
Not just any lady.
Not just any lady, one of the coolest ladies of all time, which I actually do have her here. Where is she? I just saw her. There she is. Nilji. So Nilji was from Bibbulmun. She was actually from more Bustleton, Bunbury area. So she was the affection of many, and she had this collation of dogs that went everywhere with her, and they were almost like her protectors, people trying to get up in her Maya or anything like that. The dogs had set on her, or she'd set on them, really. So it's we get to see pictures of our ancestors. This is actually one of my direct descendants. Her name is Fanny Bulbuck. I had a picture of her up on my desktop at work, in which someone from work said, "Can you please take that down? That lady is freaking me out." I said, "If only you knew your story." She was a kick-ass lady. Like, she was crazy. She crazy in the sense of crazy passionate about her people. And when the colony was starting to be established along the Swan River, they started building on traditional Noongar women's songline areas. And again, another story that Damien shared with me in his amazing research for storylines is her basically walking up to the gates of Government House and banging on the gates saying, Nuna ngunding ngang wirin mam yoga nichawa wara. You are camping on the graves of my dead ancestors. How dare you? Because they basically built over a burial ground. So it's these kind of stories through this project, which is really great for for me as a researcher. But when we would go and do the community workshops, these are the stories of those from the early establishment of the colony, and these were the leaders at the time, and to really tell their stories. This one is particularly special to me because this is actually my dad's mother, who passed away when I was only 6. So I didn't actually know a lot about my nan because she passed away when I was very little. I wrote this article, which is, there's a lot of it in Noongar. So Elizabeth Jean Collard Ken Kurlunga, she was the only child. Baal Mam Tom Bennell Muriel Maguire Bennell. Her father was Tom Bennell and her mother was Muriel. Baal Court Fred George, her husband was Frederick George Collard. Baal Kurlunga Ma Kujul. Baal Gora Kujul Not Marie. So she had 9 children, they're her children. Kurabal Kala Buja Kurlunga Kobaki Bali Kakaning, meeting place of fire. So it says her home country, or her heart country, or where she lived, was this place. I had no idea. When I was little, Nan was from Brookton, they moved to Perth, that's all I knew. So now what the amazing thing is that if I click here, it takes me to a Google Map reference to where Nana and her home country is. So if I ever want to reconnect with Nana on a spiritual, go do women's business, I would go out to these places to reconnect with my Nana. And knowing that if this is her country, this too is my country, I need to learn about this country to be able to then pass on the stories to my children, who will then carry on the legacy of the knowledge sharing. Pretty powerful tool. So we're talking about pre-colonial stuff, so stuff that's not, it's more about Noongar and their history and their experience, and then we talk about post-colonial, so those instances of Noongar history that was impacted by colonial time. People that fought for our country, which is the Noongar, what do they call it? The Anzac Ode, that's been translated in Noongar, which was actually spoken at the Fremantle Anzac Day Memorial this year, which was pretty incredible. And it lists all the different conflicts throughout history and Noongar people who had served, including the frontier wars, which is very neglected to be spoken about in this country. So the Jaeger and the Midjiguru and the Fanny Bulbuck, the lady I talked about before. It's for those who don't know, in this country, Aboriginal people only have just recently been able to march in Anzac Day parades, have only just got their medals when they returned from service, which they had to get an exemption to do because under the time they were under an act that said they weren't, they were flora and fauna, so they had to get a special act to go and give their life away and fight for home and country. When they come home, they didn't get any service pension, they didn't get any blocks of land, they basically were sent back to a mission and thanks for your service but see you later. So it's a way to be able to in our way acknowledge their role they played and to honour them. Brave Noongars, that's the same one, my apologies. Early resistance and imprisoned Noongars, which should be coming up, would be the Rottnest thing, so I'm just going to type it in here, sorry. People love going, has anyone been to Root Nest? Don't know where that is, but I'll try Rottnest instead. It's a different place altogether, isn't it? Watch 'em up.
Very different.
Yeah, so has anyone been to Rottnest before? Beautiful place, like a little jewel island off the coast. And very much for us too. A lot of people don't realise the Noongar history of it. It was Wierenmeier, place of the spirit. So Noongars didn't visit Rottnest very regularly. It was a place where our spiritual ancestors would travel. They would connect with their totem or their Māori to then go back to the mainland to be spirit watchers of family. So unfortunately too, that there's the history of Rottnest where a lot of people don't know about, where it was where the first Aboriginal prison was held, and that operated until almost 1920 as well. So we're not talking about 1700, 1800s. This place operated, within our lifetime. So just a second, Tom. So when I travelled to Rottnest, I had this really weird experience where I'm travelling the songline of my dead ancestors and going to a place where I really shouldn't be going, and respecting that being a spiritual, sacred place for spirit. Then I'm reflecting on all the Aboriginal prisoners that were sent there basically to their death and the awful, but it's a very largely untold story. Someone at work hates my guts because now that I've shared this story about Rottnest with them, they're too petrified to stay at the island. So anyway, but again, it's around knowledge sharing. It's about giving all the knowledge to people to have at their disposal to be able to see things from a variety of lenses and not just a singular lens, in which largely with Australian history we've been looking at it from predominantly a singular lens. Yes, Tom?
See, an important part about that is that in the 1960s, when I was there for camping and working there, I worked there as well.
Yeah.
There was nothing about the Noongar story there at all. So the camping ground which I was in no longer exists because someone's actually worked out after we've been camping there for years after years. Well, you can tell the story about that part.
It was a mass burial ground.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what's really, really interesting in relation to that is that the Noongar story wasn't there, and we were sitting on there just like, we were camping there, working there, all this sort of stuff.
And that's the incredible thing, Tom, for people like yourself and others, and they're walking and having these experiences, but they've never been afforded the knowledge to be able to have a different perspective. And again, that's where Noongarpedia and its ability to knowledge share is so incredible, because it gives people those other perspectives on a similar place. So Sister Kate's an example of the impact of those policies. So Stolen Generation, Sister Kate's was a specific home for fair-skinned Aboriginal children. So the idea was that you would be able to breed out the Aboriginal population over a certain amount of generations, and the idea behind Sister Kate's was that these children were fair-skinned enough to be able to fit in and assimilate. They'd be given, a minimal Western education. They'd be partnered up with a non-Indigenous family, and all ties to their Aboriginality and family and culture would be cut off. So where I work in the city of Canning, again, it's a very unspoken history about Sister Kate's. When I work at the city, we started a relationship with Sister Kate's. And we started to really honour how important as a city it was to have a very strong relationship with this, because Sister Kate's played an incredibly huge part of our history here, our history in the state and in Australia really. So, it's listing those people, sharing their stories of and not just the people that were in the homes, but the families that were impacted as well by their children, their brothers or sisters, being taken away. But the thing is too that this kind of is this is a future article as well, because Sister Kate's is now about to build a multi-million-dollar healing centre at the bush site adjacent to the site of where the children were taken and housed, around healing, trauma and healing, which is an incredible thing. We're very lucky at City of Canning to have the opportunity to be able to support that. An example of, someone give me an idea of how I'm going for time. Who was time person?
15 minutes.
Sweet, thank you. So there's contemporary Noongar. So we're talking about what's happening now in Noongar Nation, and this was probably one that got a lot of love when we were training up Noongarpedians to learn how to do entries. We're trying to think of things that they'd be interested to make entries about. Things like artisan performers, or your uncles and aunties who have actually done amazing things but never were considered a person of notoriety, which again in the Wikipedia world is important to be able to write an article. But footy, West Australians love footy, love football. Sydney is weird, isn't it? Sydney's that kind of footy's good but rugby's better kind of thing, and then there's rugby union, rugby league, and I don't know, there's a whole world going on over here, but that I'm unaware of and I need to learn about. But definitely in the West, footy is a big deal. Sorry? Stick with the AFL, yep. So we talked about Nyungars and their contribution to different football clubs, but we also then went about translating the names of the football teams into Noongar as well, which is kind of cool. So if you're wondering, who was a Collingwood enthusiast? Someone from yesterday's conference. Someone loved Collingwood, which is very confusing. But anyway, they'd be known as the... Giles, that's it, Giles' mum. So the Kulbardis is actually Collingwood, the Gilgis is Hawthorn, the Genarchs, the Devils are the Demons. But let's be honest, the most important one is the Wagulap Marmon or the Fremantle Dockers. Yes, I know we haven't got a flag yet, we don't have to make that point. But we then obviously list the different Noongar players. And then we actually have a section, other Aboriginal men. So men aren't Noongar, but they are Aboriginal and they've contributed to the team in their different ways. As you can see, I've put the women's one first. In which Cassie Davison, a young girl that I've mentored for many years, ended up getting drafted. There's not a lot of stuff on her, but she'll be happy to see that she's made it to the Noongarpedia. Incredible young Noongar leader. So, Boss Noongar. So who are the leaders, Noongar leaders of today? People say there's a lack of Indigenous leadership in this country. No, there's not. Here they are. Look at them. There they are. So we're making it aware to people that there are significant Noongar leaders. They're here and they're doing incredible things. So including obviously our chief investigators. Irma Woods took over from my role as part of the research team when I had left to go on to other things. And Irma's an amazing woman, very smart. There's a lot of pictures that need to happen and there's still a lot of content that needs to be put in. So again, Noongarpedia is an evolving beast. So we then start challenging this idea that there's no leadership. Hungry Noongar, depending on context, can mean many different things, but I put Hungry Noongar because this is what we like to eat, a lot of this stuff. I just thought it'd be funny. So we start to see, obviously, this is my totem, the dirt. We start writing articles around name of dingoes, and you can see here, this is where the influence of our non-Indigenous brothers and sisters start coming in, where they start putting in scientific data and stuff to support the article, which is really fantastic. And then, you get to learn the stories about the dingo and the interactions with different animals and spirits. It's really cool. Sorry?
You timed that well.
Hungry Noongar.
I did, didn't I?
No.
Release the food. Sadly, there's no sound. So if I can play this and you can actually hear how to say it. So because I speak Noongar, I can do it for you and I can tell you that it would say word. So people can see the language, they can hear it, so they know how to actually say it, and then we can help people with their language development. The other important thing is you'll see here that these are the different dialects. So in Wajak we say dwart, but in Wirraman they say dwart, and in Minang area they say twart. Yes?
Do any of the Indigenous languages have script also? They use English letters as script?
As
script for writing?
Script. I mean, no. To be honest with you, it was mainly orally transmitted. I mean, that's the importance around.
Drawings and stuff.
There are
but
drawings
doesn't
and
have
imagery and other things like that. Talk about hieroglyphics being some of the oldest images in the world, whereas there's evidence in this country of our own pictorial images and storytelling that's happened. So, I think that's what we're saying, is that this disruption of colonisation is this whole how do you remember all that stuff? How do they? Because they were always ever connected with it. They were always interacting with it. So if you cut off that connection, unfortunately, people start to lose some of the knowledge or connection. And so no is the very short version of what you asked me. So learning Nyungar. So if we're talking future knowledge sharing, or how we can develop the future knowledge sharing, I want to do a little exercise with you guys. Can you say that word there? Jerity? Yeah. Which is brown, or poo brown as it looks. So there's Jendal. Can you say Jendal? Jendal. Mirda. Mirda. Murn. Yeah. So if we say Murnifala, right, which is almost Aboriginal. So that's Aboriginal English. It's the hybrid, and you'll see that in Wikipedia. It is a lot of hybrid language happening, which we're trying to argue to Wikimedia and Wikipedia that for it to get off an incubator and go live, you know, Nyungar English, Aboriginal English is probably the more common variation of language use. Yeah, it's, yeah. So Wuyan, Yarak. So you can see there's a whole aesthetics, mouth movement thing going on that you got to learn. The word, my husband's been with me for 16 years, he still can't say ngain. Can you say ngain? Damien can, because he's been around Nyungar long enough, but ngain, like, I just love the look on people's face. I go, what did you do with your face? It's a whole different, it takes a lot of training and a lot of time, but the best way to learn it, if you read ngain on paper, it's that face to face, it's that connection stuff I just talked about. You've got to sit with someone and watch them and learn it. Nudam and Yort. Yeah. So if I said mul, what am I talking about? My nose, right? If I say wort, what am I talking about? My throat. Wort. Wort means right? My throat's really sore. Burning ninja strepsils. Give me some strepsils. Ya is your mouth, right? So kumbaya, ninja yoga kumbayawa. That woman got a big mouth. So you start to see how you can put it all together. So there's ability to, help people, learn the language using pictorial, using sounds, using images. We've got it all. Connecting Nyungar. So we're talking about future reflections as well. So like I said, there's lots of amazing, where's the Nyungar leadership? What are they doing to help their people? There's a lot of stuff happening. So again, Nyungarpedia is that ability to knowledge share, to show people what is happening, and for people to connect with these places as well, to work with them, to collaborate. So we provide that. Speaking Nyungar, so I gave you a bit of an example of it, but sorry, just to reiterate again, if you guys want to actually create edits in Nyungar, there's a resource there for you to think about how that might be able to occur. I would though suggest definitely working in collaboration with a Nyungar person to do that. Is probably the best way of going around it if you're not a native speaker as such. And Maya Wabin, again, it is an absolute bugger. I have no sound. But the songs of the young people, we played some at the conference yesterday. Yes, Tom?
See, one of the big problems with going to white-collar books from the last 100 years, some normal words, you can actually have up to, 10 different ways of writing it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Could you just talk to that for a second?
Not really, no. Are you talking about
the fact that there's so many earlier dictionaries, word lists, and collections and things?
Yep.
All right, but all the previous ones, you can have one word that has been transcribed into English letters.
Yep.
Even just the word Nunga.
Yeah. Nunga has 14 different spelling because there's 14 different dialects, so there's 14 different ways
so
to express.
I think that is a small problem.
And I'm going to make your head explode, Tom, because ngank, the word ngank in Nyungar, in Wajak means two different things, and depending on how you say it to somebody is what it is. So ngank can be nitja ngank, Barniwa, the sun is burning my shoulder, or I'm court burning, or my mother, I love her so much. So it can mean two different things. So this is where that connection with Yunga is so important.
Be built into the Wikipedia to be able to show the differences,
right,
or the nuances.
And we talked about that largely at the conference, didn't we? Is that the knowledge that Nyungar hold, but the knowledge that Wikimedians or Wikipedians hold, they're both as valid, as important as each other, and it's really that collaborative relationship which will create the best form of Wikipedia that we can have. Yes. Richard. Oh, I've got 5 minutes. Sorry, I'll leave you alone. You are damn good. You are damn good. So there's the traditional songs like Jitty Jitty Wankun, Cool Badi, the song about the little Jitty Jitty who annoys the magpie, and the story and the lesson is about to kids, like, yes, we love you, but calm down now because you're gonna get this here, so just pace yourself. So the stories and the songs are about lessons a lot as well. But there's also again those contemporary. This is how we bring Indigenous or non-Indigenous to Australia. Imagine if you went to your kids' school assembly and they're singing "I Am Australian" at Nyungar. Well, they can. The ability is there. It's there, and I've worked with schools to do that. Yesterday at the conference, I played a sound file of Santa Claus is coming to town, of the kids who helped me translate it, learn it, sing it, and sung it at their school assembly, which just knocked everybody's socks off. They've never seen anything like it. But it's that collaboration, and I made the point over the last couple of days, and I'll make it again, is that early interactions with Aboriginal people across this nation. And how they went down, if only they went down just that little bit differently, we'd probably be able to stand on the world stage and say we are one with a little bit more confidence, because we would have collaborated, because we would have listened to each other and acknowledged the great knowledge set and strengths that both of our cultures bring if we came together. So yeah, there's old songs, there's new songs, and there's all sorts of stuff. So We've posed this to the Education Department in Western Australia of how there's this great resource for them, and we'll keep advocating that, but we consistently still have people, even though the edit activity has decreased somewhat since the end of the Australian Research Council grant has finished, people are still very much wanting to interact with Noongarpedia as a tool to knowledge share, collate and archive. So to this day there's 905 pages. We've engaged a lot with a lot of different people to make it what it is. There's been over 100 editors, over 11,000 edits, but our big claim to fame is that we've been able to create this bilingual co-created Wikipedia page, which is the first Indigenous Australian group to do so in Australia, and we're really, really proud of that. Some reflections that I shared yesterday as well, which I think are relevant to this forum as well, is that not everyone is actually a Wikimedian, but everyone can contribute to Wikimedia in their own way. So we found that some people didn't want to be editors, but they loved taking photos, or they loved going out on country and listening and transcribing what the elders had told them, or the kids. I think the kids really like doing the photo stuff. They're learning Wiki Commons a lot as well, but also being able to use the computer and the internet to be able to learn about their traditional cultural practices. That was really cool. So people engage with it in different ways, and we will always honour that as part of, because in Nyungar culture, not everyone is a bullida, not everyone's a medicine man, not everyone's a Karjan Baraning, a knowledge holder, not everyone's, everyone's got their specific role, and it's a football analogy, but the 1%ers, everyone puts in their 1%ers. So we acknowledge any and every interaction that both our Nyungar and non-Indigenous community put towards our Noongarpedia. We did need to very much clarify the engagement to get the collaboration going to be able to get the results. And there is a need for a dedicated Noongarpedian, or at least more cultural learning in the Wikipedia space around Nyungar culture, and being able to provide that access to information, but also provide that face-to-face interaction with community to be able to create really authentic Noongarpedia articles. So just obviously quickly, as I'm here on behalf of the City of Canning, we've now convinced our Heritage Officer, who will be using Noongarpedia as a model, and the Noongarpedia product, to be able to talk more about the Jalgarobelia, or the the city of Canning Nyunga history, but also to use Wikipedia around digitally archiving our history and heritage of Canning overall, which is really exciting. So it's my sneaky way of being able to get back into Noongarpedia as well, which my boss very much supports. So Jalgarobelia is the Canning River, for those who don't know. This, as you can see, this is actually not on Noongarpedia, this is on Wikipedia. And
no, you're still on Noongar.
am I? Oh, sorry. There is one on Wikipedia as well, and it's very similar to this, where the preference of information actually comes from Noongar knowledge. So there's a little bit about the English, but it's mainly about Noongar. So that's where I can use Noongarpedia to influence the larger Wikipedia world, which is what we hope to do more and more. I think that's pretty much it for me. Thank you for listening, and I'm happy to take questions. Or not, if there's none.
Oh.
Yes.
So, great presentation. I think at the end where you said you were the first kind of like fully Aboriginal language community in the Wikimedia world. Is that right?
To create a specific Aboriginal
First
bilingual
Australian
language.
one.
Yeah, Australian.
So
yeah.
is that are you aware of other communities going to do something similar, using you guys as a model?
One of our chief investigators has made a very strong point at many different forums that people should, but it really is to, I guess, the discretion of that particular group. Obviously today we're going to hear from another a group, which I won't speak to your stuff around how they're utilising Wikipedia, but look, I'd love to support another language group to do something similar. It'd be wonderful.
There are other language groups that have asked about it, but the early stages of Noongarpedia, the first 3 years were basically just talking. So it's a long process to really start and get. Well, you're trying to blend 2 very different cultures, even though we're blended already. You know, there are a lot of difficult questions you need to ask. There are a lot of stuff you need to go into and explore how you're going to work with some information. So every culture is different, and it does take a lot of talking. It's not an immediate, let's just go do this tomorrow, set up, go and incubate a start. It's a long process.
I think because of the history of mistrust and impacts of imposed cultures and structures and things, there was a lot of back and forth with our community to make them feel comfortable that this was a safe place and this was a project in good intention that would do the right thing with the knowledge. So
they would have a sense of ownership over it.
Exactly, yeah. So that's where the sort of clarity of ethics and how we would operate and work.
Do you want to introduce Damien to follow?
So ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to take a moment to thank our previous speaker. What an amazing woman, she blew our minds, right? And my brother boy, who literally is Nyungar royalty over in the southwest, and we were very sad when he left. But everyone, Damien Work. That's it.
Excellent. So it's actually really nice to see some and hear some Noongar again. I've been over in New South Wales for around 9 months now, so I'm definitely still adjusting to getting all of the Noongar country out of my head and getting the New South Wales in there. So my name is Damien Webb. My family are Palawa from Tasmania, so we're the extinct ones that you may have heard of. Definitely not extinct. Probably explains why I look like a unicorn, but that's a story for another day. I work at the State Library of New South Wales. I used to work at the State Library of Western Australia. So I'm the manager of the Indigenous Engagement Branch. So I'm going to be talking about some fairly library-specific things, but included in this will hopefully be some tools that you can use and reference systems and protocol kind of guidelines around using Aboriginal knowledge and digital material, specifically from archival sources. So if some of it is a little bit too library, just feel free to tune out and lean back. And I will speed through it a little bit so that I'm always the guy that has to present for the food. So well aware of that one. And I'll apologise to my colleague Miley, who's seen this presentation before. So if you walk out, I won't be offended even a little bit. Wow, I was
making the excuse already.
And yeah, Miley, my colleague from State Library of New South Wales. So, as always, I will acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we're on today, so the Eora of the Gadigal Nation. Pay my respects to elders past, present and future. Given that this year is the International Year of Indigenous Languages, I also want to specifically thank elders past and present that have managed to hold on to the language, sometimes just scraps of it, and sometimes full languages. New South Wales has very similar issues to Western Australia and the Noongar mob in that there are contested areas of country. A lot of communities and language groups that have managed to hold on to some language and culture can be very protective of it, so we can actually end up with Aboriginal gatekeepers that can sometimes do as much damage as the traditional white gatekeepers did with our knowledge. And so it is a very contested area, but I do want to thank the elders that have managed to hold on to those threads and keep that continuity strong. Branch at it's just a shameless plug for the branch at the State Library. So we're actually one of only 2 Indigenous engagement or Indigenous specialised branches within a state library. So our role is to work within the collections, to actually decolonise the collections, to recontextualise old material, to bring stronger understandings to how the material was collected. So I know Ingrid touched on some of the issues. The vast amount of Aboriginal knowledge held in these archives was collected or mediated by outsiders and by non-Aboriginal people. Often people who had a very clear agenda in either dismissing our knowledge to take our land, or to justify that we were either savages or we were capable of being saved through assimilation. So there were only a couple of very clear narratives, and most of what was collected, those biases are very, very clear. So part of our job is to kind of untangle that and to help the particular community that come in to actually work through those archival records. There will be cases where people will have to, look past very offensive language at pictures of their own families. In WA, there was a woman that could only find a picture of her great-grandmother by typing gin into the catalogue, and so every time she had to type that in there, she had to be reminded of all of that history and those derogatory terms. We work with a lot of community groups, bringing them into the library, but also moving the library outside of Sydney, so trying to bring back that idea of the state networks and a lot of the regional Aboriginal communities that don't get the support or don't have the ability to come directly to the library. And we develop policies and frameworks for the libraries and bigger libraries. So we're one of the only dedicated branches, as I mentioned, in these kinds of 3 key areas. So when we talk about digital intervention in this space, we're talking decolonisation, right of reply, and indigenisation. People have heard some of those terms, maybe all of those terms. Probably the first one, maybe the second one in an academic sense. And the third one, which is getting a lot more traction. So decolonisation is quite explicitly undoing the process and the damage of colonisation. Going back and looking through those biases and making very clear how things were collected, why they were collected, and the condition they were collected in. Recognising the bias and limitations of colonial power structures and knowledge systems and actively rebalancing them. So that is quite controversial in some library areas because there is this notion that libraries are neutral, that we are information sources and we are neutral, but the idea of neutrality in information, the idea that you can describe a photograph of anything with pure neutrality is quite a fallacy, and it's taken a long time for libraries to understand that biases have come in all sorts of ways. The Dewey Decimal System is an incredibly homophobic, racist tool, but is something that we still use. You wouldn't think that's capable, the numbers would be capable of that, but the way things are condensed, the number ranges. To look up Aboriginal history, the numeracy you need is profound. You're up to about 9 decimal places for a lot of Aboriginal history within the Dewey Decimal System, so these bizarre limitations we've inherited without questioning. Right of reply, so this is about actually creating mechanisms so somebody can reply directly to our materials. So a lot of cases, just a couple of weeks ago, somebody saw a picture of their dad that they hadn't seen for the first time, an older woman we were working with, and she was, moved. It was beautiful. She got a copy of the photo, but in looking at the caption just described this indolent, lazy black that was sitting down in the dirt, where he belonged. Very, very horrific caption that she was rightfully quite confronted by. The library's traditional response to that was, that's the caption that came with the photo, so we have a responsibility to preserve the historical context, but that doesn't need to be the first thing you see. Those things can be moved into notes fields, and even in thinking about how you use attribution, the university UTS has recently drafted ways to reference country and language groups within the, I believe it's the Harvard referencing system. Miley would have to correct me on that one. So there are ways now to actually reference country, to reference where something came from, and which is the first thing we look for when we're looking at material. This also has links to ideas around data sovereignty, parallel provenance, so there's some very interesting work being done around understanding things that can have more than 3 or 4 different provenances and without having to arbitrarily assign authority to one. Yes?
You're 5 minutes left.
Thank you.
I recognise that you didn't get to Starbucks.
It's okay. I know the food's right there. And indigenisation. So this is kind of the flip side to decolonisation. So there is some strong feelings that decolonisation still focuses too much on colonisation as the be-all and end-all, that it was a traumatic, disastrous event for Aboriginal people, but what we actually want to do is indigenisation. So I don't know if, the Bruce Pascoe effect, I don't know how many people have read Dark Emu, but must have been thousands, tens of thousands of white researchers and historians have looked over the same sources that he's referencing and never glimpsed the sophistication that he saw. Putting us in front of material about us, even if you think the story of it is known, can actually give you some incredible insights. And Uncle Bruce is a rock star over here. So just to give you an idea, the bulk of our collections do come from, you can imagine the agendas of some of these places. Government officials, the anthropologists and linguists were often amateur anthropologists and linguists. And as Ingrid mentioned, depending on whether they were Dutch, German, English, Scottish, how they heard our language and how they transcribed it was deeply influenced by all of those ideas. And this is kind of looking at why we need this continual intervention. So because of all of these issues, Aboriginal people are still really disconnected from the archival sources about us. There's a few of us that work in there that know our way around, but the bulk of it is still actually kept in large, very colonial sandstone buildings over here. And that does require people to go in there, and there are still routinely Aboriginal people that will not go into those buildings for a whole bunch of reasons. I know plenty of non-Aboriginal people that get a little bit intimidated going into the Mitchell reading room over here, but these spaces were designed to be vast and intimidating on some level to kind of, it's like the kind of white male status thing around knowledge from particularly around the 30s and 40s. The language used to describe us varies from problematic to outright offensive, and it's very hard to describe how demoralising it is to have to type those terms in routinely to catalogues to find yourself or to find your family. If you're lucky, it'll be native. If you're fancy, sometimes you'll get sable. Sable's one of the best ones I've seen, which is apparently an old heraldic term for black. It's a sable fellow, which is much better than my dusky friend, but yeah, you do actually need to have this bizarre literacy of knowing all of those racist terms and using them, which is really, really confronting and quite challenging as an Aboriginal person. That's library nerd stuff. A couple of tools you may be able to use and can adapt for things like Wikipedia when you're referencing or when you're thinking about how knowledge should be structured. So the ATSILAN protocols, which is the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Library and Information Research Network. So these were established in '95 with Mun Nakata and other really, really important Aboriginal researchers. It's a comprehensive set of frameworks and protocols for working with Aboriginal knowledge, Aboriginal collections, Aboriginal photographs, understanding how a photograph taken by a white settler of rock art under Australian copyright law is the photo's there, but it doesn't actually capture at all that there might be 100,000 years of knowledge in there, that the Australian copyright law is woefully inadequately equipped to actually deal with those concepts.
What's the best way to get into that?
If you Google ATSILAN, it'll be the first thing that pops up, so there's a website with all of those on there. The other framework we use routinely now is the UNDRIP, so United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Australia is signed to this, as much as Australia is committed to any human rights work. We are signed to it, so it is actually something you can invoke and use and reference. Human rights in Australia is a bit of a distressing thing at the moment, but it is something that you can use to broaden what you're looking at. And this does touch on a lot of the same ideas about right of reply, about ensuring that Aboriginal people have first say, or at least authority over how our culture and our languages are presented. The last and most recent is ICIP, so some people might have heard of this. So this is a new framework being developed by Terry Janke, Aboriginal lawyer and champion. You should see her impression of Deborah Bowman, it's really good. Indigenous copyright and intellectual property. So this is actually about addressing some of those issues that I flagged earlier. So this is actually a comprehensive set of frameworks that take those kinds of looser ideas but try and embed them within the current legal framework Australia has. So the library is about to, we're a few months away from kind of releasing our ICIP frameworks, and this is about things like consent forms, permission forms, understanding that things that we've used in the past that were okay, that are in the public domain, all of these usual considerations may not be enough to actually be using material in a culturally safe way. You do actually have to go back, and whether that's about seeking permission or whether that's about simply understanding. So with this language exhibition we've been working on recently, it's a matter of putting on these forms that the library doesn't, you know, we might own the video recording that we've made with people, but we make absolutely no claim of the potentially, you know, tens of thousands of years worth of knowledge that might be held in the language they speak or in the stories they tell. It's about understanding that there may be group ownership rights, that it might be 20 families that own the intellectual property of a story, not one individual. So that's a very, very interesting way of looking at things. I suppose these would be the 3 points I'd leave you with, which is looking at examining your processes for intervention opportunities. So when I was speaking with the public libraries, this was around digitisation. This was around taking that opportunity if you're looking through material, if you're auditing photographs, if you're searching for things to include in articles, actually take the time to think about whether you can have a bit of an intervention, whether you can take that material back to somebody that's connected to, and even feed that information back to wherever the image came from, if it's something you're using from an archive. View the disruption of the status quo as a moral imperative. That these protocols are not there just because they're best practice. This is actually a moral imperative. This is why we use things like the UNDRIP to actually tie this to something bigger than an idea or intellectual property. This is actually a moral imperative. This is something we need to do as human beings. And actually use the tools and frameworks that are around. So dozens of times I've seen project groups and institutions try to establish these things that already exist. There are black academics everywhere. There are people that are really, really good at thinking through this stuff, and most universities have an Aboriginal Knowledge Centre or school that are working on some really, really sophisticated things. So actually lean on the things that have already been made and don't assume you always have to reinvent it yourself. And now I will leave you with more tea.
Okay, I know everyone's
Too small.
sorry. So I'll thank Damien and Ingrid for starting the discussion, and feel free to corner them and throw them over the balcony or whatever you want to do. And, you know, just don't make a mess for us to clean up.
Space policy.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Sorry, you know how to do that.
Does they extend all the way out the window?
It's only in here that's the friendly space, over the balcony's fine.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I will leave
But
this
no.
with
Okay. Damien's cards are around, so you can take one of those.
Need an
and
intellectual
contact him.
library.
And we've